Hi everyone, my name's Julia, and I'm really glad that you're all here today. You always have that little bit of a nervous feeling as a speaker that, oh my gosh, nobody's going to come to my talk, particularly when it's something that's not quite techie at a very techie conference. So thank you all for being here. Before we get started, can I just get a hands up of anyone who has something that they want to achieve? Anything at all? Right, great. And who sets goals for themselves and then periodically ticks them off? Okay, a few of you. So a few years ago, I discovered a love for running. And I found myself setting lots and lots of goals and things that I wanted to achieve in my running. But I didn't quite know how to go about achieving them until I realized that I actually had the knowledge all along, and it came from the work that I did in my tech life. And that came from all the Agile processes that I was using in the projects that I worked on. So the talk that I'm going to do today is all about how we can go about achieving goals by using Agile and the Agile principles. But we're going to use running as a metaphor because I love running. And in particular, I really love marathon running. So here's a couple of photos of me being really silly and dressed up in tutus at marathons. I'm a little bit marathon obsessed. I have now run 5 of them since October 2015, as well as countless other races. And I'm currently in pursuit of my grand goal, which is to run 26.2 times 26.2 miles, so a marathon, by the time that I'm 26.2, because I figured it was a nice number, and we may as well try. When I'm not running, I work as a software engineer at Founders Factory, and they are an accelerator and an incubator with the ambitious goal of launching 60 new companies within 5 years. So you can imagine that we write a lot of prototypes and we throw away a lot of code in the process of doing that. And prior to that, I've been lucky enough to work in a number of different environments. I worked at an agency, I've worked at a consultancy, and at a big corporate, and now in a startup world. And at all those places, I've worked on many, many different projects, and all of them have been run using Agile in some form or another. As you can imagine, at the big corporate, Agile was maybe more of a waterfall methodology, but they called it Agile, and it sort of went along. Whereas at Founders Factory, we very much use the lean startup methodology to get our projects and to build these new companies. And I really like lean because it takes Agile as a concept and boils it down right to its core ideas, which is this cycle of build, measure, and learn. It's about constantly measuring what you've done and then evaluating and learning from what you've done previously to improve in the next build cycle. So each time you repeat this cycle, it's an iteration, and you move incrementally forwards towards a final product. So every time you learn, from your measurements of your previous build, you're saying, oh, this didn't quite work right, so let's change what we've done, or even move in a new direction so that the final product that you're going to create is successful. The official definition of Agile is a method of project management characterized by the division of tasks into short phases of work and frequent reassessment and adaptation of plans. So it's this cycle of incrementing, adapting, and moving forwards. The other definition, and the very clear one, the very obvious one, is about agility. So the ability to move quickly and easily. And that also really ties nicely into our running metaphor here. So we're going to talk about run, measure, learn, as opposed to build, measure, learn. And now, while I'm going to talk about this in terms of marathon running, it can be applied to any goal that you want to achieve, right? Because we're looking at the principles of Agile and seeing and finding those golden nuggets from these processes that you yourself probably know from your day-to-day work to help you achieve the goals that you want to. So to guide our discussion, we're going to be using the 10 principles of Agile as outlined by Kelly Waters back in 2007. So Kelly Waters has now written a book and runs the All About Agile blog. And she wrote these 10 principles of Agile. I've kind of reordered them a little to fit in with this metaphor. And interestingly enough, on the initial blog post that she wrote back in 2007 with the 10 principles of Agile, the top comment was, "Oh, don't worry if nobody's looking at your blog. It takes a little time to get into these things." And this is now the #1 hit if you Google principles of Agile. And she's written a blog. A lot can happen in 10 years. These are not the 12 principles from the Agile Manifesto, because I find that the Agile Manifesto gives you a set of rules, whereas Kelly has extracted from them some ideas and the concepts behind them. So we're going to use those to move forward. So #1, capture requirements, or in other words, make a plan. Any project that you start can be seen as a crazy goal, right? If it's not a crazy enough goal, then you won't be motivated to try and achieve that thing. If it's too easy, then you're just like, oh, I could do that, that's fine. And you're not going to go out and seek to and endeavor to actually complete it. And if it's just too big a goal, then it seems completely intangible and like you can't even make the first steps towards it because it's just enormous and you're at that point in time not equipped to get there. So it needs to be a crazy goal, crazy enough, not too crazy, and it needs to be time-boxed. If we don't have a time limit on a goal, then we drag out and say, oh, yeah, I was meant to do that thing, but let's just push it back a little while, and then we'll push it back again. By giving yourself a time frame, you're saying, actually, I need to achieve this by this certain date. Again, if that time frame is too short, then you won't realistically be able to achieve it. If it's too long, that's basically the same as not having a time frame in the first place. So when you start on your project, you've got your goal, and you need to decide what's going to be included in order to make it a success, these requirements. And you can start finding them by taking some learnings from past projects or from your current situation in order to evaluate and figure out where you are now before you can move forward and decide what needs to be done. So, for instance, our project is to run a marathon. And your current situation, your current learnings are that you've never run a marathon before. At the moment, maybe you run 2 to 3 times a week. The furthest you've ever run is 10K. And you did once participate in a Santa fun run, and you thought it was really awesome because you got to wear the hat and everything, run around as Santa. So from that, you can now pull out some requirements, some high-level objectives of what you need to achieve by the end of your time frame. So this would be things like to run more regularly every week, to build up your long run, to add in strength training and stretching, to improve your nutrition, to participate in events. It all links quite nicely with that evaluation of where you are currently. From this list of requirements, you can then go about drilling down and figuring out exactly how to achieve those things. So in running, this comes in the form of a training plan. And you can find them online. There's so many of them out there for beginners, for intermediates, for advanced runners. They might be 12, 16, 20 weeks long. No matter where you are right now, there is somewhere out there the right training plan to get you to your goal. And that training plan is essentially your backlog, right? Each run, each strength training session, each time you need to stretch, is a task that needs to be completed. And you can stare at that training log, and let's say it's 6 months long, right? That's a lot of running to do. And if you're at week 1 or week 2, and you're staring at this whole list of activities that you are going to have to do over this next 6 months, that can be really daunting. So principle number 2, create small, incremental releases and iterate. Take it week by week, and constantly reflect. So I mentioned that I am trying to now run this crazy number of marathons, and that is something that I'm not equipped to train myself for, because I don't have the knowledge of what's going to happen if I'm trying to run one marathon 2 weeks after I've done another one. So when I came up with the challenge, one of the first things that I did was to go out and hire a coach. His name is Justin, and he essentially works as my product owner. He is in charge of my backlog of my training plan. And the way that he works, that we figured out together, was that he writes into a Google spreadsheet every week exactly the runs that I need to do just for that week. We've discussed the high-level goals and the high-level requirements in order so that I can hit the times and achieve the marathons that I want to. But the actual nitty-gritty of that backlog, he is in charge of. So every week, on a Monday, I can go into my Google spreadsheet and see what I need to do and only focus on that week and not need to worry about what's coming in the future. And this is similar to scrums and scrum sprints, right? Where either maybe it's every week or 2 weeks or 4 weeks, whatever the team decides on, you set up the tasks that need to be done and the features that you want to complete in that time period and only focus on achieving those. At the end of that sprint, you then come back and you reflect. And it just gives you the ability to, again, not worry about what's coming 3, 5, 6 weeks down the line. So this has very much all been about the build, or the run phase so far. We also need to talk about measuring and learning. So when we want to measure how a project is doing, you often might use a tool such as Jira. In this, you list out all the tasks that need to be done and incrementally move them through the process. And it gives you nice metrics such as team velocity, or if you're also tracking the hours that it takes to complete a task, you can get some really nice data and breakdown for that. For running, most people now will run with a Garmin smartwatch or their smartphone hooked up to Strava or something, so that you can get all your details about pace and distance, even heart rate sometimes. It's all that concrete data about what you've just done. But it's more than just that, right? Running isn't just the numbers, it's also how you feel. Maybe you ran fast, but you felt awful, right? And you can't see that in the numbers. So one thing that I like to do is I write by hand at the end of every day in a training log about how I felt about that run. If it was just awful, if it was brilliant, if it was freezing cold, if I ran with friends, if I listened to music, all that information. And that becomes another way of measuring how that run went. So then when it comes to the learning part of our cycle, we can take all that information, both how we feel and the solid metrics and statistics that we have, to influence how we're going to approach the next week or the next sprint of work. In a software project, this comes in the form of a retrospective. So your entire team will sit down in a room and discuss with each other how they felt about that previous sprint, the work that they achieved, and have a look at the data and metrics to say, oh yeah, well, okay, maybe we need to do a little bit less or a little bit more because our velocity was great. And then from that, can put together that next week. In running, you can do exactly the same thing, right? From looking how fast you went, how slow you went, how far you went, you can take out those learnings and extract things, particularly using that training log to add extra information for you. For instance, if you went to the party last night and had a really great time and drank maybe a few too many beers, and then you tried to go for a run this morning, well, maybe your run wasn't great, and that gives you a bit of an idea that you shouldn't do one or the other. For me, I chose not to go to the party, but I'm guessing most people would probably go the other way around. This brings us on to number 3. Requirements evolve, but the timescale is fixed. Adapt to your circumstances. So let's look at this backlog, this training plan we have. This is essentially the ideal product that you could create and that you could release if you had all the money and the best tech resources in the world, and absolutely nothing went wrong. But as we all know, projects are never perfect. They never go exactly how you want them to. Problems always crop up. It might be that in the first week of working on this project, you implemented a library, and now, a few months down the road, you've discovered that it really doesn't integrate with the payment gateway that you need to do. So you're going to have to go back, swap it out, and that will impact all the other work you need to do. So you flex your requirements, and you shuffle things around, you cut some things out, so that the things that need to be done can get done. Exactly the same thing applies when it comes to running, right? For instance, I have a friend who's currently visiting in London, and my run this morning was with her. We went for a nice little jog around Hyde Park. But I was meant to actually have a rest day today. I wasn't meant to go running. So instead of saying, oh, no, sorry, we can't meet up, yesterday I didn't do a hard session, as was in my plan, and I did a bit of an easier one so that I could also go running today and I wouldn't get myself injured. The biggest rookie error that you can do is to follow a training plan or a backlog to the absolute dot. I once tried to do this back in 2015. I had this goal of running a 10K in under 45 minutes. And I thought I really could do this. And I found a training plan. It was an advanced 10-kilometer training plan that went for 12 weeks. And I stuck to it religiously. Every single run that it said to do, I did it. I hated it so much. I was not an advanced runner at that stage, and it was entirely too much for my body to handle. I got completely injured to the point where I had to sit at work and make my colleagues bring me coffee and lunch because I couldn't stand up. Admittedly, I still make them bring me coffee and lunch, but that's because I'm lazy and not because I can't stand up. In the end, I did end up running this 10K, but I did it much worse than I possibly could have, and I was in so much pain while doing it that it was entirely pointless. And if I had listened to my body and listened to my brain and everything and not just thought that I was a failure if I didn't stick to the absolute T of this training plan, probably all would have gone a lot better. Principle number 4, complete each feature before moving on to the next. So let's talk about features. There aren't really any clear features in running. It's not like working on a project where, say you're building a website, you have to build a navigation, you have to build a header, you have to put some content in, and it all becomes really nicely packaged sections of it. Or maybe your goal is to write a book, and in that case, every chapter is essentially a feature. It's not the same in running. You could just go out and run a marathon tomorrow if you really wanted to. It would probably be utterly awful, you would feel shit, but you could essentially do it. So what are these features? Well, we mentioned that it's something that needs to be completed. So let's say it's something that needs to be completed in order to achieve success. And in running, that comes in the form of a long run for our endurance events. You need to build up your long run and teach your body what it's like to actually run for, so that come race day, you can achieve that goal. And then the other part of it, so complete each feature before moving on to the next, is the complete part. What is complete? Well, in software, this principle means that each feature needs to be done, as opposed to just done. Right? So it has to be styled, has to have tests written, has to be accepted by a product owner. You can't just say, oh yeah, I wrote the code, it's perfect, go, without having done those things. It's not complete. So in running, it's about completing each one of those long runs and really getting to the end of it, no matter what happens in the midway. Sometimes you just do not want to keep running. Perfect example of this for me was when I was training for that very first marathon I did in Melbourne. And I had a training plan where I ran 34 kilometers, 36 kilometers, 38 kilometers, and that was it. That was the last 3 longest runs I had to do. 34K went fine. In the 36K, though, at 15 kilometers in, I was sitting at the side of the road crying my eyes out because I just did not want to go any further. Even worse, this was on a highway, so there was just cars coming past the entire time and sort of looking at me going, oh my gosh, what is this crazy person doing? But I did it, and I pushed through, and I got to the end of the run. And I learnt so much more from that run, from having completed that, and being able to say that, you know what, no matter how badly things go, I have that ability to push through, and I can keep going. And the next week, when I went and did 38K, it went brilliantly. So you need to complete each incremental step up in that long run before you move on to the next one, so that your body can learn what that's like, and you can take away those lessons. But what if you miss one? I mean, occasionally you just sort of sleep in, or something crops up. This requirement, these evolving of the requirements and adapting to our circumstances. Well, then you just need to, again, adapt and flex your requirements and change your core feature long run slightly. So it might mean that if you did 20 kilometers one week and then 27 kilometers was meant to be the next one, and you missed a 24 in the middle, instead of running that 27 kilometers next week, you do 25, and then 28, and then 30, and you slowly get back on track to where you need to be. So you bloat some features, or you take a little bit away and sort of move things around so that all nicely fits in, and you can still achieve your timeline. The result is your minimum achievable product. So whatever you have, whatever you release, the race that you run on race day, is a thing that you are able to do with the training that you put into it. And that doesn't mean that your training has to be perfect. It just means that you need to prioritize some core features versus the nice-to-haves, and that will make you more likely to succeed. Principle number 5, test early and test often, and integrate testing into the project lifecycle. So this comes into our measure part of the build, measure, learn cycle. When we create software, we write tests. Why? Because we need to know that the code we've written works as we expect it to, and so that we can identify any issues really early on. We need to try out different inputs and make sure that all of them work. We need to verify that if something has changed over here, it's not going to affect the rest of the system. We need to have confidence in what we've created, and we need to be able to prove that it works. We do exactly the same thing with running. Running in a marathon event is very, very different to if you were just to go out and run 42.2 kilometers or 26.2 miles by yourself. Because there's all these people there, there's this amazing atmosphere, there's this great camaraderie. There's also fierce competition, even if it's just with the guy dressed up as a toilet. Because believe me, you do not want to be overtaken by the toilet. It's everything all in one bucket. And even better, you often get medals, so bling, and t-shirts at the end of it. What more could you want, right? If it wasn't for this one fun run event back in Sydney, which is my hometown, I don't think I'd be running. It's called the City to Surf. And it's 80,000 people. It's one of the biggest fun runs in the world. And you get people who do this, all walks of life, all shapes and sizes, and from people who can run it in like 45 minutes to the people who take 3 hours. It's 14 kilometers long, I should mention this. So it's not a marathon distance. It's a lot shorter than that. And it means that everyone gets involved and everyone wants to try it. And probably if you live in Sydney, at some point, you have run the City to Surf. And I did this as in end of 2013. I had sort of been running on and off, not very seriously, but I set the City to Surf as my goal. I didn't know yet about how to apply these principles, so my training went out the door, and I sort of went, oh, well, I might as well just do it, and we'll see how it goes. And it went better than I expected, not because of my running, but because I got this incredible vibe from all the people around me and made me realize that running is actually fun. It's not just a slog. It's not just a way to lose weight. It's actually something super exciting because everybody's there on this mission to get to the end together. And lining up there on that start line, you've got this adrenaline in you, right? And you feel nervous because this is your goal. And now you have to perform, right? So how do you know that it's going to go well unless you've tested it? So the best way to test is to try a fun run before you actually go and do your marathon. Now, fun runs are great for a number of reasons. Firstly, if you've never done that distance before, it becomes a great interim goal towards your full marathon, for instance, right? So again, you can apply this to any sort of goal that you might have. If what you're trying to achieve seems too long and maybe too big and 6 months is a bit too far away, put an interim goal in the middle and work towards that and take it as incremental steps towards that end. If you have run this distance before, it becomes a brilliant way of measuring. Say that the event that you're signing up for is a half marathon, and you've done a half marathon before. Last time you ran it, it took you 2 hours and 20 minutes. This time, it's only taking you 2 hours and 10 minutes. That's a 10-minute gap that you have created for yourself through your training. It gives you confidence that what you're doing is working. And the third thing is that you get to test out race conditions. Because as I mentioned, it's very different to run an event as it is to run by yourself. Particularly if they're serving cups and you have to try and learn how to run and drink out of a cup at the same time, and it basically just goes all over your face and you get 2 sips of water. Don't run all your runs on your own and then show up on the day of the marathon to just become completely overwhelmed by all the people and the conditions. And even though you've put in the training, and it's been quite a bit of training, it just all goes to shit because 4 kilometers in, somebody elbows you in the side and you can't deal with that and you might end up crying. And it just takes you by surprise and you can't get over it. You can't get back into your groove. That's like if you build a website and push it into production without having done all the right tests and then discover that it actually crashes if more than 100 people try and access it at one time. Or that you've written a form and with a slightly different input into it or a slightly different electrolyte drink in a race, then the system bugs out and you spend 5 minutes at the side of the road vomiting. Instead, test early, test often, and integrate those tests into your product lifecycle. Number 6, apply the 80-20 rule. This can be used really nicely in order to learn and improve and impact that next cycle. So you've probably heard of the 80-20 rule. It's otherwise known as the Pareto principle, or the law of the vital few, or the principle of factor sparsity, which is all kind of fancy ways to say that you, in a lot of circumstances, will get 80% of the value from only 20% of the effort that you put in. It was named after Pareto. It wasn't discovered by him, but it was named after Pareto because he had done some early research and found that 80% of the land in Italy was owned by 20% of the population. And then he later then also looked at some peas, and he found that 20% of the pea pods held 80% of the peas. In our software, we can see this because it's that the majority of your users will get a large amount of value from only a small number of functions. I like to think about this in terms of a DSLR camera, for instance. There are so many people who will go out and buy a DSLR and then put it on auto and just click, right? They won't use all the other functions there to try and get the right photo because they are getting 80% of the value from only 20% of the effort. So how can we use this to achieve our goals? Because sometimes we don't know where that 20% is. And that's where the learning comes in, right? From learning and reflecting. So in running, when we talk about 80-20, we mean 80% easy and 20% harder. So 80% of your run should be easy in order to build your endurance, and then 20% are sort of medium to hard in order to build your aerobic capacity. And it's those two things in conjunction that will drive you forward to achieve marathon success. So in your learning and reflecting, you need to go back over your measurements and figure out, okay, am I maybe doing too much, a little bit too hard? Can I put in a little bit more easy runs and have a few less hard? Because it's quite likely that that 20% of effort is all you need in order to get 80% of the value. So now let's talk about some external people. A cooperative approach from all stakeholders is essential. Number 7. We need to have our stakeholders on the same page and feel actively involved in what we're doing. In software, you have a team that is building the project. It might be your engineers, your designers, a product owner, some quality assurance engineers as well. Whereas for running, it's really just you pursuing your goal. Maybe you've got a coach or a product owner in there with you, right? But that's still the concept of the team. They are the people building the project. The stakeholders, then, are the external people who are not building the project, but they still care about its success. So it's anyone in the business who has some sort of interest in this project succeeding. And in running, that's your support network. It's your friends, it's your family, it's the people around you who care about your success and are ultimately going to help you move forward and drive your success, right? They are going to hold you accountable. The best example of where you can see this is at any time during one of these events is to look at the sidelines, right? See the people who are cheering. I don't know if anyone's ever gone to the London Marathon and seen just like the number of people at the side of the road willing everyone there to get to the finish. It's amazing. They're all stakeholders and they care of the success of those people. For me, my biggest stakeholder is my boyfriend, Sai. He's absolutely incredible. He comes along to most of my races and stands there and follows me round to various points and cheers. At Dublin Marathon, he was even principal lipstick applier because I decided I wanted to wear orange lipstick, but it kept coming off. So every time I saw him, he had to put more lipstick on, right? And that was his piece of ensuring my success, right? He was a stakeholder in that. And he needed to be involved in that to drive it forward because I knew that every time I saw him, that was another milestone. That was another bit moving forward and getting to the end. And if your stakeholders aren't on board with you, then it's quite likely that if you're going, oh gosh, I really need to go for a run, and people are like, oh yeah, okay, it doesn't really matter, then you're not going to go out and you're not going to achieve that goal. People around you need to be supporting you and moving you forward and be just as much invested in you achieving your goals as you are. This brings us on to number 8. The team must be empowered to make decisions. You need to make the decisions that are right for you. So stakeholders are great motivators, but they can't tell you how to get to your goal, right? They are not the ones building the project. You are going to have to do that for yourself. In a software scenario, the team needs to be involved in prioritization, in estimation, and in making decisions about how to build that product. Your reason for choosing your goal and your journey to get there is going to be different to anyone, even if they have the same goal as you, right? Where you're starting is going to be different, and how you are going to fit that in with the rest of your life will change. For instance, if you are somebody who works really long hours and you can only commit to, say, running on the weekends and maybe once late at night, that's what's going to work for you. And you need to be empowered and understand that that's the decision that you have made. And nobody else can tell you how to go about achieving that and to tell you to do it differently, because you need to know what's right for you. One of the things that I decided to do this year in order to achieve my goals is to give up alcohol. I now no longer drink, and it's sometimes really depressing. But it's a decision that I made for myself. And every time that someone comes up to me and says, oh, but come on, just come for one beer, I have to be empowered and say, actually, no, I don't want that beer, thanks. I will have a glass of water. I will still come with you. You have to be empowered to know that the decisions that are right for you, because the getting there is on you. You have to build that product for yourself. Principle number 9, user involvement is imperative. Get people involved. In software, the priority number 1, numero uno, is to get users involved, right? Because whatever you're building is going to be customer-facing in some way, shape, or form, right? But running is an individual pursuit, right? It's just you achieving that goal. And it's a pursuit that you could do entirely by yourself if you really wanted to. But the thing about running with other people is that it's a brilliant motivator because they become involved in your journey. And just like you would observe user behavior, right, to figure out where things could change and what you could improve, meeting other runners and getting involved in the community can show you the tips and tricks that they use in order to achieve their goals. Their goals might be the same as yours, maybe they're different, but you can always take out little nuggets of information from them in order to improve your own journey, right? So you can use these to help you succeed. It might be that somebody did this one session that you've never thought of, like maybe it was a pyramid session where you run longer and longer and then shorter and shorter or faster. And they have said, you know what, try this. It really worked for me because I pushed myself and then I pulled back a bit and I found that I felt really great at the end of it. And you can go, oh, that's interesting, and take it away and move on. Or maybe it's something completely different. For instance, I learnt one of my favorite tricks, which is to put Vaseline on your feet to stop blisters, from someone else. And from learning from them and getting myself involved and speaking to people about the issues I was having, it helped me to solve one of the issues that I was having. And runners are more than helpful to share their knowledge and expertise. One of the first things I did when I signed up for my first marathon was to join a running group. It's called NRG, back in Sydney. And it's got an amazing mix of people, from people who are just trying to run their very first 5K to people who are running 240 kilometers, right? That's crazy. But from meeting all these different people, it made my own goal seem not as terrifying as it possibly could have been. It's this power of others and having people involved and getting yourself involved in that community. And that doesn't even have to be in person. Another great source of inspiration in meeting these people is on Instagram, right? It's my go-to source for running motivation and to find support from others and to share my journey. I also use it as a great way of having a log of runs that I've done. So I can look back and say, oh yeah, I remember, 6 months ago I really couldn't do this thing, and now I've achieved it. I wasn't able to run 15 kilometers, and now I've just gone and done 20. Wow, that's an amazing step up. It gives you confidence in yourself. When I first moved to London, exactly a year ago today, I beforehand went and followed a whole bunch of runners on Instagram so that I could involve myself with that community without even being here already. So that I knew the right people and I could get those tips and those hints from them and then come here and feel like I was involved in everything. Number 10, deliver products frequently. Don't stop there. A company will never run one project and then give up. That is, unless they're a startup and maybe they've run out of money. But even in that case, the founder is probably going to go on and move on to another company or another project. Instead, it will take the learnings from a project that it's done to start another one. Maybe it's an improvement, a new iteration on what's already been released, or maybe it's something completely different. But you continue moving and you frequently deliver products. So why stop running? If you've gone out and you've run your marathon, congratulations, that's awesome. Don't stop there. You've put that training behind it. And maybe you've learnt that actually it was really too long, so try something shorter. Or if it wasn't long enough, go and run an ultra. Or maybe the learnings that you had was, okay, the running bit was good, but in my training I actually really enjoyed the cross-training part and trying some different things. And in that case, move in a new direction and try a triathlon. Or if you absolutely hated it and you never want to touch another pair of running shoes ever again, take up knitting and set yourself a goal there, right? I'm sure you'd be able to find a way to apply the same Agile principles to help you achieve that one too. So that's all that I have to say for today. As I mentioned, I'm trying to run 26.2 marathons by the time I'm 26.2. And if you want any information about that, you can go to 26marathons.com. In the process of doing so, I'm raising money for charity, so there's a nice big button there if you want to donate and give me a few pounds. I'm also going to try and set a Guinness Book of World Records at London Marathon, so there will be updates on all of that to come. Please follow me on Twitter, or if you want to check out my Instagram with lots of running photos that you can find there as well. And does anyone have any questions? Yes?
But hopefully we all have a vague idea how you gather requirements for software.
Yeah.
You talk about gathering requirements for running, and I guess you found you could get a running plan.
Yeah.
How, if it's some other project, how do you gather, how do you know you've got them all, how do you have this one?
So you could probably incrementally also gather those requirements, right? It might be at the beginning you sit down and you've got your high-level requirements. You've said, generally, I know that this is something I need to do, this is something else. You can do a lot of research into that, and then just taking each one of those and breaking them down into parts, right? And yeah, as I said, incrementally continue working on that. So maybe you don't know all of the things that you have to do right now, but you say, okay, in 3 months' time, once you've taken those learnings from what you've done already, you will realize, actually, there's another bit, and there's another bit. And that might impact your timescale a little, which is not ideal, but that's when we come to prioritization and figure out exactly what you need to do and what of that goal. And if you don't know all the requirements and you think there really is a grey area, then maybe your timescale needs to be a little bit longer so you can allow for those sorts of flexibilities in there. Does that help? Yeah? Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you very much. Enjoy lunch.